Jaspir Puar's book, The Right to Maim, looks at the connections between disability, debility, and capacity to show governments and neoliberal systems use these ideas to control people. Instead of seeing disability as something fixed or permanent, Puar describes it as an assemblage, meaning it changes depending on history, politics, and culture. She explains that while disability rights movements usually focus on empowerment, accessibility, and inclusion, these works can sometimes hide the fact that states and systems deliberately produce debility and injury as part of their control over populations. The main idea of the book is what Puar calls the right to maim. This idea is different from Michel Foucault's concept of the state's right to kill or let live. Puar argues that in many situations, the aim is not to kill but to injure them in ways that keep them alive but permanently debilitated. Maiming, in this sense, becomes a political goal rather than just an accident of violence. Puar uses the example of Israeli policies toward Palestinians to show how this works. She explains that Israeli soldiers often practice shooting to cripple rather than shooting to kill. This leaves Palestinians alive but disabled in a place where hospitals and healthcare systems have been destroyed and medical resources are very limited. This tactic is sometimes presented as a more humane approach because it avoids death, but in reality, it creates long term suffering. Puar calls this logic will not let die, meaning populations are forced to survive in constant debility. She sees this as a new form of biopolitical control that liberal rights based frameworks cannot fully address. Puar also makes connections between Palestine and United States. The phrase Ferguson to Gaza highlights the links between the militarization of US police forces and Israeli occupation tactics. In the US, police violence often results in death, while in Israel there is a clearer pattern of intentional maiming. Both are a part of racialized systems of control where violence on the body makes power visible. Another major part of the book is Puar's discussion of disability and transgender studies. She shows how both areas can fall into exceptionalism, where certain groups are prioritized over others. For example, she points to how the Americans with Disabilities Act excluded gender identity disorders, which reinforced ableist ideas and supported gender norms. She introduces the term transnormativity to describe how trans people are pressured to fit into neoliberal ideals of productivity, flexibility, and capacity. In this way, trans bodies are made useful to capitalism, which thrives on constant adaptation. Against this, proposes the idea of becoming trans, which is not about fixed identity but about embracing the fluid, multiple ways bodies exist. This approach challenges the neoliberal idea of flexibility, which is often used only for profit. Puar also explores what she calls crypt nationalism. She argues that disability is often absorbed into nationalist projects in the global north. For example, disabled veterans from wars are celebrated as part of national pride, but the mass disabilities created in the global south by imperial wars are ignored. This produces what she calls scholarly colonialism, where disability studies focus mostly on the West while overlooking the majority of disabled people in the South. The celebration of disability pride in this context can sometimes work as a cover for US imperialism and settler colonialism, both of which actively produce debility on a global scale. Puar stresses that disability cannot be separated from questions of race, colonialism, and geopolitics. Concepts like debility and capacity are not just medical, they are political tools used to decide who lives, who dies, and who must live in a state of permanent injury. By bringing together disability studies, critical race theory, queer and trans theory, and postcolonial analysis, Puar offers critique of how liberal frameworks fail to account for the deliberate production of mass suffering. She concludes by calling for a broader understanding of disability justice, one that connects movements like Black Lives Matter and Palestinian solidarity with the struggle against the right to maim. This vision demands not just survival but truly livable lives for all.